I want to thank you for accepting me here today. I think the General has said it all. So I'll give my own little perspective on what leadership is all about. I'll also give it from a political perspective. I'll also give it from a national perspective. Trying to round up with what I think we really need. Leadership for me is objectivity, first and foremost. And you have to be objective even at your own expense. Some things may not agree with you, but if it's for the common good, you need to start by taking and looking at the common good. I'm going to try to go through quite a number of things real quickly because I'm hoping that we can even take a question and answer subsequently. And that allows me to further expatiate on a lot of the things I'm going to tell you right now. Leadership is about efficiency and creating aspirational goals, not just for country, but for collectively your perceived role as a Nigeria, for example, in the role of the black race and Africa as a whole. So you need to be thinking ahead of not just Nigeria, but thinking ahead of the black race and the role you're supposed to play for that race and the continent as a whole and the black man in the diaspora. So that is the perspective I'm going to start from in what I say. Number one, as a leader, you're never above the law. Never above the law. So while you are there, you rule, you lead by example. But when you leave the office, remember that you have left the office and you play the elder statesman. Do not get involved with what is not necessary. That is one aspect. Another aspect is that many of our leaders come into governance assuming that nothing prior to their existence was done right. They always clean the slate, and as they have ideas and they want to move forward. What I've seen as a big bane in Nigeria's leadership and growth is the fact that we never really calm down to look at what has been existing before we got there. Have we ever lived by that? Have we ever implemented that? But we come with this big ego of having this big ego of knowing it all and think you can run, forgetting that you inherited a system that has been there before you got there. Yours is to come and build on that, provide the leadership to do it, and hopefully from doing it right, the future can be built going forward. It doesn't begin and end with you. You're just a pawn in the game of a country. It doesn't begin and end with you. And we keep forgetting that. Another bit is the president is always sworn into office taking an oath on the Constitution of the Federal Republic. But many a times, we never live by that Constitution. What we do is to look at that Constitution and trying to interpret it in ways that help support our own thoughts and our own egos. We never go back to look at that Constitution and say, what is it meant to be? What is my role as Mr. President? And how do I begin to implement what is required of me? You cannot govern like in your house. You cannot govern like a paramount ruler. You have to live by the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Whether you like it or not, that's what you sworn to. If you want to change it, go and amend it. But at that point in time, you have to put your skills and your leadership skills to making sure that that's what you swore to and that's how you're going to implement it. The ability to deviate from that then you begin to have problems. You start creating multiple agencies for the same problem. You start creating multiple outlets because you want to build rings around the Constitution and what is required of you. While all you have to do is to stick by that law, go by the Constitution that you've inherited, and allow that to help you build strong institutions. It's all about strong institutions. The general closed by saying that you have to build a system that is beyond you. The only way you build that is living in that Constitution. You're an ex-military man, you must understand where I'm coming from here. And that by building that is to build that institution to what it is that you can refer to today as an ex-general, because you went through that strong institution. Politically, we don't do that. Instead, we try to build, instead of dealing with fraud or FIU or Banti, like we had them in the police in those days. In those days, if you're invited to Banti or Alagbon, you don't sleep all night. You'll be shooting bricks, all night. But now, you have EFCC to deal with, you have ICPC to deal with, you have Bureau of Public Prosecution to deal with. Instead of strengthening the one constitution that you have. Why? Because some leader decides, this is how I want to do it to make it effective. Forgetting that it failed because you never stuck by what was there originally. If you strengthen what was there and build on what was there originally, you will not have those problems. But instead, you will have people go to those other same quasi-institutions you created from the same police force. So have you changed everything yet? You haven't. But you have this ego in you that you think, yeah, I know it all. It doesn't work like that. You're not running your own home. And even if you run your home, there's a limit to how far you can change the rules. Furthermore, we have to understand, by living through the Constitution, as a leader, your responsibility is to making sure, like we have in the Constitution of the People's Redemption Party, we must be in command of our what we call commanding heights. Government must be government. Government shouldn't be in business, and business shouldn't come and choke government. Our role is to provide a level playing field for every Nigerian. Our role is to play leadership roles by making sure we have good regulatory systems, to making sure that the opportunities are created and you have, like I said earlier on, an inspirational leadership and government and country. Many cases, we don't put round pegs in round holes. But even when you put round pegs in round holes, they're only as good as the leadership they have. You must first and foremost know exactly what you want to achieve to be able to determine what that round peg should be. We lack a lot of that. Instead, we pay political favors at the expense of a whole country. That is the beginning of fallacy in the system. We need to make sure that is corrected. Also, a lot of our professional bodies, you're ex-military, you're ex-surveyor, you're ex-accountant, you're a military man, you're an accountant, you're a lawyer, you're a surveyor, you all belong to professional bodies. Do our professional bodies even ever hold our leadership or their own leadership responsible? If you are working in the civil service, You're the Accountant General of Nigeria. You're an accountant. Does your own professional body hold you accountable? The first thing they do is give you an honorable title. They call you to dinner. Why? Because they believe it's an opportunity to create a value chain. Some call it procurement, but it's called a value chain at the end of the day for members. But not to hold you accountable for what you're doing right or not doing or doing wrong. That is part of what needs to be changed. My able general spoke about disrupting governance. I have a slightly different view to that, forgive me, sir. The only way you can disrupt governance is to disrupt the process to getting the governed. First and foremost. First and foremost. If you decide you want to go through an electoral process, playing by the same rules that the big two parties go through, you will never get the disruption in governance you're looking for. You need to have people who think out of the box, who don't have to think everything is about money to govern, and provide a different platform to making sure that the elected come out and their votes count. Then you will disrupt the process. It takes having to have the right people in governance first to disrupt that process. And if you don't take care of the process of disrupting the electoral process itself, we're going to continue to have this discussion for another 50 years to come. That is the key to solving that disruption you spoke about. Also, sir, taking notes from your speech, sorry, so I have to quick. Leadership is a collective. It's a collective. So yes, you have Mr. President as number one, but also collectively in our own little corridors of power, how well do we actually exercise that leadership ourselves? A very simple thing, for example, I just came in from Kebbi, and speaking to the traditional council members there, they were talking about security. And I gave an example of my days, my NYC days in Zaria. The late emir back then, Shehu Idris, was more of a father to me. What he does annually is to go on an emirate tour of his domain. When he goes there, he goes to each village or each community, sits down, listens to them, they all bring their grievances, and then he tells them, you know what, this is your problem, right? Why don't we solve it this way? He takes it as far as he can based on the restrictions under the Constitution, and then settles them by simple arbitrage. You give up this, you take this, and so on and so forth. But at some levels, he's handicapped, so he takes a note. And he will now write to the state governor after every trip to say, look, I've been to this community. These are the problems. I could sort it out this far. But you as state governor have to now step in and take that last step so we can have lasting peace. That's why I said it's a collective. And also, in that area, you just don't stray into a community. You just don't stray into a community. You come into a community, you report yourself to the district head or the chief. They ask you questions as to where you are, where you're coming from, what are you doing here. They have a history of you. So when the problem starts within the community, they know exactly where it's coming from. And that is why I said leadership, especially in governance, is a collective. And that's just one of many examples I can give. Also, This one, I have to think well how to put it. Because I'm not a pastor, and I can't match the generals. I have to think how best to put this. But what I will say is this, is to try to understand that the solutions are not too far off. It takes a lot of hindsight. It takes a lot of foresight to understand that. You may look at a problem as so huge, but we need to learn to step back a bit and look at where the problems are coming from to be able to make that solution. Simple things like our security today. I had a big debate last night with a former Attorney General, just discussing. And we were looking at the security structure of Nigeria. And my argument was that, look, there's nothing really faulty with this system, but the fact that we haven't actually lived by the model that the Constitution required us for our security. The day we do that is the day we start having our solutions. But what you now find out is that there are a few things. Number one, it's not understood. Many who want to lead don't even know, have never picked up our Constitution one day to understand it. And the few that have read it or understand it, try to look for ways to making sure that it works for them, not for the country, not for what it's designed for. Yeah. So if we just step back and tell ourselves, and I use the security thing for example, we're supposed to have a National Security Council. That council is made up of 8 members. We've never exercised that council one day since 1999. But you talk about security. But if you go back to that and work it backwards, you will see that most of the problems we have security-wise, that is the origin of it. Do not go with the mindset of the guys there don't know what they are doing. You need to equally understand what it's all about first as a good leader before you begin to query the way forward. My time is up. I want to thank you for listening, and God bless Nigeria. Thank you.